Hey folks, this is Lucid, and we are about to do the Middle Age tier list. It seems folks enjoyed the Early Age tier list. I'm going to do a not quick, I can't do anything quick, a less long introduction for this. Before we get into doing the tier list, just know that this is my opinion, right? And furthermore, not only is my opinion going to be wrong about what the tiers are, and all of that, but your opinion's probably wrong too. So our opinions are both wrong. And part of that is because Dominions is a complicated game. And to get good at it, it takes a really long time. And then once you're good at it, you have to spend a lot of time thinking about a nation to really understand it. And there's so many times that it's happened in Dominions that, some player will look at a nation and think of a new way to play them, and all of a sudden it starts really performing. So anyway, we're going to do this tier list, and it's going to be based off of my understanding of the best ways that I've seen nations played, or heard of them played, or could anticipate them being played. And it was kind of interesting. We had a lot of good discussion that came out of the Early Age video, and there are a lot of people, that are like, oh, this wouldn't work, or, how is this high a tier? And then we got into testing it and talking about it and stuff. So it spurred some really good conversation and tests. And a lot of it ended up being about Abysia. And because if you recall, I gave it an A rating. People were like, oh, it can't be A. And oh my God, we just crushed all these little scenarios with burning ones. It was hilarious. Anyway. And just good cap only sacreds doesn't make you A tier alone. But anyway. We're going to get on with the tier rating for Middle Age. So S tier, this is the nation has some very strong, overwhelming competitive edge without major downsides. Or the downsides are totally tame compared to the edge you get. A is going to be, it's a really solid nation. It's got major strengths, but it's probably also got some downsides it's got to work around, or its strengths aren't that major, it's just super well-rounded. B is not a bad rating. B is a very good rating. B means you've got lots of things you can do. It's a strong nation. Usually you have lots of little, odds and ends and doodads you can do. Or you do a few things very well. But you're also going to have some kind of major weaknesses, or the things you can do well aren't overwhelming. They're cool and it can work, but it's not like something's going to spiral out of control or anything like that. But anyway, we'll see a lot of good nations at B. And then C, this is where, if you're creative, you can probably pull one out of your hat here and pull out a win. But you're probably going to have to think outside the box on the current meta, or you're going to have to really outplay your opponents, or something like that. And then D is where we're kind of struggling to win. Okay, so we're going to get into it. I'm going to just go in the order of the flags that are loaded. So first up, we have Abysia. Oh, and by the way, thanks to Lawgiver again for he made these flags, and then I imported them into tier lists. So they're very nice and clean looking, I think. Okay, so first up is Abysia. And middle-aged Abysia is interesting. Actually, you know what, guys? Before we get into Abysia, more preamble. You're like, damn it. So what are the things about Middle Age? Middle Age is one of the least balanced eras. In other words, there's a very big disparity between the most powerful and least powerful nations in Middle Age. It also tends to be a nation of low blood. And it's also a nation with a lot more competition over the water systems. There's a fair amount of underwater nations, and there's a lot of amphibious nations. Those are kind of some of the trademarks, and more armor and stuff than in the Early Age. Less giants and stuff. Anyway, that's kind of the Middle Age. But less blood, and that brings us to Abysia. Middle Age Abysia is not late Age Abysia is the Abysia that has the most blood, but Middle Age Abysia is one of the few blood powers left in the Middle Age. Blood has kind of died out in the Middle Age, and these guys have some of it, which matters for something. The cost of that, though, is their sacreds aren't as good. And I can't remember all the units in there, but I think, while Abysia, I think, was an A because they could get some sort of momentum from their build, I've never seen anything like that for Middle Age. And the problem is the bar's set a little bit higher in the Middle Age. So there's a little bit of power inflation. So I would say in the Middle Age, Abysia is probably between B and C tier. They're probably somewhere down here closer to C. So I think we're going to put them there. We're going to come over here and check real quick. I'm going to just make sure I'm not... I was preparing to do a Femoria guide. I'm just going to check real quick. We're not going to do this on all of them, but I do, and I want to keep it moving. But I do want to check and make sure I'm not losing my mind here. Yeah, okay, these are the cap-only commanders, and then they get these guys. It's pretty similar to the Middle Age, to the Early Age. They do get... They get the Demon Bread, which is a flying leader, and they do have the... Does it have Demon Bread Infantry Slayers? No. Lava Warriors? These guys distinctly not as good. They do still have Berserker. They're tinier. I don't know. You could probably still do some kind of crazy bless around these guys. Okay. It's kind of weird, actually, just looking at it. We'll get back to the guide, but they've got the Demon Bread Commander. One of the problems Early Age has is they have these guys as flying troops, but they don't have anybody flying to lead them. These guys, they have the flying leader, but they don't have any of the flying troops. Or so it appears. So anyway, we're going to put them at C. It's possible that they're at B. I haven't seen it, and I would need to think a lot more about it. So we're kind of starting off on an ambiguous footing. Next up, we have Agartha. I think Agartha, this is the best of the Agarthas. They have lots of the cool stuff. Yeah, and there's some things that Early Age does better. Like they have more kind of Recruit Anywhere Sacreds. They can mass alms. There's some kind of cool stuff Early Age does, but Middle Age is so cool. They get, all the summons. They get pretty good cap-only Sacreds that are going to allow them to contest underwater quite well. Importantly, they have a Dominion effect with their, the aura for their nation basically that makes all inanimates. And there's some, it's not only inanimate, it's like inanimate plus something else, but mostly like if you have a golem or something like that, or a statue, or a lot of your summons that are inanimates, they're going to spawn with up to twice the HP. And it's going to be based on how many candles you have. So at 10 candles, I think you get twice the HP. So it's pretty cool. And then on top of that, they're just really solid. They've got pretty good Recruit Anywhere mages. They've got pretty good cap-only mages. So I totally dig Agartha. They do have some mobility issues. Next up, we have Arco. Arco, we're going to have to check real quick. I've got to cheat. Arco is not going to be an A tier like they were in the Early Age. The problem with Arco in this age, they still have good mages, like Mystics are still awesome, but they get the Heart Companion, which just does not compare to the Wind Rider. They're still okay, and they're a formation fighter, so you can pack a lot per square, so you can do good buffing. They're probably still solid, but it's also a harder era, and they don't have that momentum coming out of the gate. I think they're between B and C, but I think in the hands of a skilled player, they can still do a lot of the tricks that they can do in the Early Age. They just don't have the same kind of momentum. Next up, we have Ashdod, which is one of the A-tier nations. They are very good. Some people would probably say, oh, they're super duper good. I'm not a super huge believer in the Ashdod Hellbless Rush, but it is definitely a thing you can do. And it is one of the nations. There's some nations in the game that you take some kind of Hellbless, and you can basically just march at somebody's capital. And sometimes they can stop it, but oftentimes they can't. And this is one of those nations. So, yeah, say hello to Ashdod. They can be played Hellbless, but they don't have to. They have really good national mages. They have pretty good national troops. Middle Age, we've got more population, so you can focus more scales if you want to. But you're probably going to want at least some kind of bless, because you do have good sacreds and good mages that are sacred. So anyway, Ashdod, super cool nation. Next up, we have Asphodel. Now, most people would say Asphodel is the worst nation in the game. There's a lot of things that's going against it. Like, you kind of need to have a hard bless to expand well, and if you have a hard bless, eventually you're not going to get any more of your cap-only sacreds because your population's going to die and you're not going to have any recruitment points. So then it's like you're really sad. And their free spawn sucks. That's the other thing. They're hard to buff because they're undead. They tend to not be very killy because they've just got the sleep vines. There's a lot of problems with Asphodel, but in my opinion, they're not that bad. I think if you kind of min-max them, you can actually get them up to be a C or a B tier. I'm going to leave them here at C. Part of it is a head nod for how everybody else thinks it's a D. But also I don't really think it's a B. I think it's like a C. My personal opinion is between a B and a C. But they can do more stuff than people think. Next up, we have Middle-Aged Atlantis, which Middle-Aged Atlantis is cool. I dig them. It was one of the most fun games I had, that Middle-Aged Atlantis game. It was just so much fun. I mean, it was crazy. I had to fight Pelagia at the beginning, and then after Pelagia, I was next to Relay, and then we had to fight Yis, and we had to fight this huge TNC, and it was so cool. It was a ton of fun. I think I built them a little wrong, but I don't know. I had so much fun playing them. I would do it again. They're solid. You feel like you always have a lot of stuff you can do, but there's nothing there where you feel like you have some crazy, overwhelming advantage. They're just solid. They have cool stuff they can do. Next up, we have Bandar Log. Bandar Log is, I think, between a B and an A. I think they're a B. They have lots of cool stuff they can do, but they also have weaknesses. They get recruited anywhere sacreds. They get the white ones. Their cap-only sacreds are pretty good. They're the Tiger Riders. They get blood summons if you can break into blood, which is pretty tough, and I'm not even sure it's worth it. But anyway, if you find garnets or something, it's definitely worth it. But, I don't know how much it's worth, like, focusing your pretender on that. But, yeah, it's a solid nation. They can do a ton of stuff. I love Bandar Log. It's super cool. It requires high finesse. It requires a lot of thinking about your bless based on what nations you're going to be fighting. And, if you build it wrong, it's also kind of a vulnerable nation to, like, being rushed down. I mean, you can also have really strong sacreds where you're not going to be vulnerable, and you could also have, like, a Titan. I mean, it totally depends, but this is, like, one of those nations that's very amorphous, kind of like Caelum. Depends a lot what you take your bless, how you play them, and you don't even really need that much of a bless. I mean, you have good summonable sacreds, but you also can play Bandar Scales. Scales Bandar is a little tricky, though. I've tried Scales Bandar expansion, a little tricky. Next up, we have Caelum. Middle-aged Caelum is really cool. They are the Caelum that gets huge recruit anywhere air mages. They don't have Eagle Kings. Eagle Kings are like the best, right? So it's goodbye to Eagle Kings. It's very sad. But losing out on the most awesome Eagle King, which is cap only, they get recruit anywhere. Pretty good dudes who are going to be dropping huge air magic. And then otherwise they do a lot of things that Caelum can do. There's probably a few more things that are special about middle-aged Caelum, but I think they're solid, just like the other Caelums. They play differently, though. A little differently, just because your mages are different. Next up, we have Satis, which is probably the best of the Satises. I think they get Shamans. I was actually just wondering about that earlier today. We're just going to check real quick. Do we get Shamans? Yeah, we do. So yeah, this Satis can do a ton of stuff. You've got good Astral, you've got Marshmasters, which can do all of the fun Satis stuff. So you've got really good troops. You've got a Dominion, which gives you passive income. It also poisons people that enter your lands. What more can you possibly freaking want? I'm just kidding. They do have some weaknesses. They're in some ways a little they're not like one-dimensional, they're like three-dimensional. Or maybe four-dimensional. Which isn't that many. That's not really that bad. That's kind of a lot of dimensions. But they have good troops. They've got elite warriors. They've got astral mages. They've got good nature magic. And they've got Skelly spam and poison plays. So do they have assassins? They can't have assassins. I don't think they do. Oh, they have assassins, cap only. So yeah, they're pretty good. I would say they're definitely A tier. Next up, we have Eriu. Eriu suffers mostly from the fact that TNN, which is an early age nation, is actually really good. It's like an A tier nation. I think I put them as A tier. If not, they're like right there for being an A tier. The problem is they're just worse, basically. They're like a worse version of TNN, and they're in a much harder era. So, yeah, that sucks. I think the thing is, though, is that TNN was pretty good, and these guys are definitely still playable. Like, I think these guys are between B and C tier. So if you thought they were B, I would not be upset with you. But they also kind of are like a C tier. So I think I'm going to leave them here, but if you think they're here, I'm not going to be upset with you. Next up, we have Ermor. Ermor got nerfed pretty hard coming from 4 to 5. They made it... You used to get a lot more Pretender design points, and 4, like, you could go Quad Bless if you wanted to. But now they make it so, like, you start off with Death, so you don't get those free scales. You might even start... No, I don't think you start off with Cold. The Bless system isn't quite as good for Super Hell Blesses and Dom 5. So they get a few kind of nerfs, but they're still really good. I think I think the problem... So they're really good, but they also have major weaknesses. So I think they're actually between... They're on, like, the lower end of A. They have some problems, you know, like you are either going to have a shit ton of troops or you're going to have mages. It's really hard for Ermor to get like good research. If you don't have research, there's this kind of like wall you hit once certain counters come out. But that said, you know, in Ermor, people who don't know how to deal with Ermor also kind of get wrecked. The other thing is Ermor gets completely bamboozled by Undead Mastery. It's just, and especially if they're not like a research Ermor, if they're just a crap out troops Ermor, if you can get to Undead Mastery and you have mages to cast it, ooh, good game. Much more vulnerable to that than a nation like Lemuria or something. Okay, next up we have End. I think End is a C tier. When it came, it's such a weird, crazy nation. When it came out, people were like, you know, everybody's looking at it, trying to figure out how to play it. They've got these auto bless units. It seems really cool. They've got the doggos that are really cool. They've got, seemed like there's all this cool stuff they can do. And then people started playing them in games, and then nobody's been able to play them well that I've seen or terribly heard of. Yeah. I mean, for God's sakes, I killed Sakane was playing them, and I killed them with Asphodel. And it's not often I go after Sakane, because normally that's a recipe for trouble. He doesn't go down without a fight. And he didn't, but... anyway. But yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know how to play End. But it's one of those nations, you know, like, somebody might figure it out. It does have some fundamental problems, though. Like, the fundamental problems are it's really hard to have, like, a strong plan of what you're going to do when you're so terrain dependent. And some of the terrain, you don't even know what you're going to get when you build a fort there. You find out only when you get a fort, which is ridiculous. They could probably use something. But, you know, it's also possible people just haven't figured it out yet. And it's, you know, it would be really fun to have one of the really good players invest some time in trying to figure it out. Okay, next up, we have Jotunheim. I like Jotunheim. I think they're an A-tier nation. They're, you know, it's like the Niflheim progression. They have not lost much coming from Niflheim. They're different, you know. It's less focused on, like, the blue giants. But they have some really cool stuff. They have lots more budget stuff they can do. And they got reworked now. And I don't remember all the units. But they got reworked to have the Thissig... don't ask me to say it. These guys. So pretty solid sacreds. And then do we have all these? Oh, they get these from Illwinter. And then yeah, they've got Scrotty and Gaija. And then they've got these dudes. Oh, and these guys, which are basically like super duper Gaija. Yeah, they seem pretty cool. They also have hags. I really like Veti hags. I think Veti hags are super clutch. And they do have wolf riders and some other Veti. So they're kind of cool. I think that compared to Niflheim, Niflheim is going to be much more friendly to a new player. Like with Niflheim, like if you're playing single player and you want to have fun, I think Niflheim's like the best nation to play. They're so cool. They're thematically awesome. And you get regenerating giants and you go around and stomp stuff. There's not quite as many, in my opinion, super obvious strategies with Utgard. I mean, you can get some crazy bless like you can on most nations, right? But it's not going to feel the same as it did with Niflheim. That said, there are some more budget and more finesse-friendly plays that Jotunheim can do that Niflheim can do, but it can't do them quite as budget or efficiently as Jotunheim can. And, you know, they also have more different threat vectors with the stealthy, Veti raiders and things like that. So, anyway, that's them. Next up, we have Machaka. I think Machaka It's kind of funny doing this because I remember when I was like arguing on Discord that Machaka is not it's not like it can't do stuff. Like it can still do stuff, and it's kind of true. If you watch, General Confusion has a video where he plays Machaka in a series. It's like a full-on Let's Play. I highly recommend you watch it. One of the opponents is Scalaria, which, spoiler, it's going to be up here in the S tier. And he just wrecks Scalaria. And he and I got into a disagreement. Friendly, but I was like, dude, like, Scalaria misplayed. You can't say that, like, you conquered a legit Scalaria and say Scalaria is not that broken. Like, Scalaria just messed up. And he's like, no, dude. I whooped them, and they were doing the Scalaria things. They weren't misplaying. They were being Scalaria, and I whooped them. And he said it in different words, but I was like, bullshit. And so we went and tested it, and, he was like, this is the kind of army that I think I could have by that point as Machaka, or that I did have by a certain point. I think it was like turn 20. And I was like, okay, well, if you don't misplay Scalaria, this is the kind of army you'll be bringing. And I went and looked at some of my old games with Scalaria to see what kind of army Scalaria would have by turn 20. And we had those things face off. And, oh my god. I mean, Machaka just crushed Scalaria. Absolutely brutally. So, that said, the nation that, like, at turn 20 crushed the S tier nation, I'm still going to leave them a D rating. They have some cool stuff they can do. They have assassins. They have good nature magic that's recruit everywhere. You can do they've got really cool sacreds. Their cap only sacreds are expensive, but they're really cool. Sakane played Machaka pretty well in my Marignon game, if you want to go look at that. But I think it's totally possible these guys are a C. I think they do struggle going into the late game, though. Like the recruit anywhere mages they have, like being high nature, like nature 2 or 3, like that only gets you so far. But, potentially people figure it out, and, I don't know. It's possible it's a C. I think it's between D and C, to be honest. Next up, we have Man. Middle-aged Man is a cool nation. I think they are an A-tier nation. If you want to play Man, you could argue they're B-tier. They're between. They're like lower end of A. They can do cool stuff. This also is a great nation if you want to get... if you want to try out communions. Communions are very punishing if you don't understand them. And they're also punishing if you're lazy. And they're also punishing if you do understand them, but sometimes you make a lot of mistakes. Because when you mess up a communion and it becomes unbalanced, or things happen that you don't expect, either A, important spells that you wanted to cast don't go off, or B, and this is like the worst thing, is you log in to see a battle or your turn, and it's like, oh, I won the battle, but all of my communion slaves died. And you lose like 20 mages. With Man, they can go into like acquire communion, and when mages start taking HP damage, like the slaves, they don't die or take damage, they just fall out of the communion, and then they wake up and act like normal mages. So it's a very cool nation. I like it. I dig. And yeah, they have pretty good units. They've got a lot of longbowmen. They can do really cool stuff, but it's kind of like an air nature nation. Next up, we have Marignon. I think Marignon is at the lower end of A. A lot of people are going to disagree with this. I think the consensus would be, like the community consensus would be Marignon somewhere around here. They struggle to get a bit of momentum, but they have some of the better... They're hard to mass, but they have some of the better Recruit Anywhere Sacreds in the game. And that means something. That means something. They also, the Witch Hunters are pretty good mages too. They're a little expensive, they're a little vulnerable to magic duel, but, depending who you're fighting, yeah, I think they're pretty damn solid. And, you've got good troops, you've got good mages, you've got really good summons. They're, expensive and they may not be, but like Harbingers are super good. They can thug. They're going to give your nation lots of air magic. I like Marignon a lot. This is some of my personal bias. I think Marignon's pretty good. I think I would have won my Marignon game. This was the blitz I did where we couldn't end up controlling the bot, and it just went crazy, and we had to we just had to roll with it. It was kind of cool. Wagamama played with us too. He's a Dota streamer, but he's also a Dominions fan. So if you're watching this, Waga, respect. Next up, we have Mictlan. Mictlan is kind of interesting in the Middle Age. On one hand, so like I said, the Middle Age blood is kind of gone. Some of the biggest blood nations in the early age are no longer blood nations, really, in the Middle Age, and that is Xibalba and Mictlan. Mictlan lost all of their blood mages. They get no blood mages that I can think of. Maybe they get it on a random or something, but if we look up Mictlan, no blood mages. Don't be distracted by these summons, right? No blood, no blood, no blood, no blood. But they still get blood on their summons. So Mictlan, they lose all their blood mages, but they keep their summons. Xibalba, which we'll get to in a bit, they keep some, but not all, of their blood mages. They lose a bit of blood, right? But they lose all their blood summons. So it's kind of hilarious. Anyway, so Mictlan, the other thing that changes about them going to Middle Age is it used to be that Eagle Warriors are cap only, and Jaguars are recruit anywhere. In Middle Age, it switches. So in Middle Age, you can get Jaguars in your cap, but Eagles are recruit anywhere, which leads to some kind of cool plays. You can have some very cancerous Eagle Warrior builds, and Eagles are cheap. So depending on what you're fighting, having a ton of crazy Eagles land amongst you can be, or Eagle Warriors can be pretty punishing. They have 2 attacks. Yeah. Anyway. Mictlan, I would say it's still solid. Yeah. The thing, too, because you're not as focused on blood, I think you want to take a lighter bless on Mictlan in the Middle Age. You still want probably a heavy-ish bless, but I don't think you can burn all your scales, because you still are going to need to get money to make your sacreds. Whereas in the early age, you can just have blood mages, and then they will take your population and turn that directly into troops. So there's Mictlan. Nabah. Oh boy, Nabah. I think Nabah is right between A and B. They got a buff with the... It's easier to do blood magic with Nabah now. Their troops are nothing to write home about. The camels are nice. Their cap-only sacreds are kind of nice, but they also kind of get wrecked by real units most of the time. It's possible I haven't seen the right build for them, or I haven't played the right build. They do have Malakas, which are really good mages out of their capital. So they have some really good cap-only mages. But they do have the Salt vulnerability thing, and they do get some cool summons, like they can get Shaitans and things like that. How good are they? Where do we land them? I think for me, God, are they better or worse than Marignon or Man? They can probably hang with these guys. It's possible I'm inflating a little bit the A tier. We'll have to see. Next up, we have Nazca. Somebody to kind of set the bar. Nazca's, after many nerfs, is still S tier. They're just phenomenal. It used to be they were overpowered in terms of they could just produce a bajillion Sepayas, and they're going to drown the world in undead sacred summons. And then they nerfed that, and then people figured out, well, we can just make a shit ton of Condors, right? And then they kind of nerfed that a little bit. You can still make a ton of Condors. And then it's like, okay, well, we make a ton of Condors, but we can also just recruit a ton of slaves, because that's also something Nazca can do. And then they kind of nerfed that, but not completely. So now Nazca's like kind of nerfed from where they were, but oh my god, they still have so much they can do. They have really good mages. If you want to, you can go pretty hard into... I think you do want some bless, because the Condors are sacred, your Sepayas are sacred, you've got pretty good sacred recruits. How hard into the Hellbless you need to go, I think it's up to you. But, yeah, they are they're a fierce nation with lots of options. It's kind of like Ashdod, where you kind of want to take a bless because you've got tons of crazy sacreds, but you also have really good mages, and you also have pretty decent kind of options that don't require a bless at all. So that is Nazca for you. Next up, we have Oceania. Oceania, they are, again, I think going to be D tier, but we'll take a quick look at them because I'll be honest, I'm just not that familiar with Oceania. They are basically the same, the Pangaea of the ocean. They get their sacreds, probably. They do have these guys who can come on land. Yeah, they're pretty amphibious. They're just kind of like a worse Pangaea. I think it's basically the same thing. You know, the nice thing is, unlike Pelagia, which is definitely going to be D tier, they get pearl farming and stuff, but God, they have a hard time coming on land. They do have, I think, better. Let's look at Pelagia real quick. Yeah. Yeah. They do have these. I mean, Ducados are not horrible. They're pretty bad, though. They're pretty bad. I mean, the Astral randoms are, of course, going to be useful. And these guys can come on land, too. And you can kind of go on land. I don't know. I'm honestly not. I don't know the middle-aged ocean game very well. I mean, I know Pelagia. The thing is, there's a lot of. Let's kind of pull back a little bit. Middle age is an age with a lot of underwater competition, which means, you know, there's potentially going to be a fair number of underwater players. If you have a lot of underwater players, Pelagia becomes pretty viable, right? But I think you only pick Pelagia if you're planning on eating a few underwater dudes. You know, if you're going to be the only underwater nation, I don't think Pelagia is for you. Oceania would not be as crazy if you're going to be the only underwater nation, because you can raid from the ocean. Next up, we have Pangaea. Pangaea, probably still A tier. Probably still A tier. Maybe not quite as good, because I think in some ways they're very similar to early age, but I think, you know, like there's power inflation from early age to middle age. Is it fair to have them up there? And man, I might be being a little too generous with some of these. I might be being a little too generous. I had recorded this once. I'm coming back to do it. They did. Okay, so they're more of a blood power because they get pandemonics, which are going to have guaranteed blood access, whereas they don't have to just random it on a pan like I believe happens in the early age. Yeah, they're probably still an A tier. Phaeacia is an interesting nation. They can sail, and they can sail through their dominion. So any place that has dominion, any unit can sail. So it's kind of cool. They kind of, I think they struggle a lot with maps. Like if you put them on a coast and they're near oceans, they don't have amphibious units. And like almost, I don't know why. Like they definitely, an island start from amidst ocean nations is horrible. I'm just going to put that out there. I think it's really bad. Unless the ocean nations don't know what they're doing, I think you get wrecked. Like you get the Dominion pressure coming in. There's just a lot of bad things. They do have some cool units. The Prince Consorts and stuff are pretty cool thugs. Pretty versatile mages. I mean, they've got good mages. They got pretty good troops. They're pretty solid. They can do some cool stuff. I think they're B tier. Getting an island start's not great, and coastal start's kind of good, but maybe not great if you're a coastal start onto an ocean nation. If you're a coastal start on your own private lake and there's not ocean nations nearby which are going to come take up residence in your lake, maybe not that bad. Anyway, Phaeacia pretty solid. Middle-aged Phlegra. I feel like middle-aged Phlegra is probably also A tier. They get basically free spawns from their tyrants. I think the tyrants are super legit. And I do like the mages, like the shackled mages and then the oppressors who basically it's a built-in artificial communion. I like them. They do have weaknesses, but they have major strengths too, like pretty good free spawn. And it's not totally free because you get unrest, but I dig. I definitely dig. Next up, we have Pythium, which I think Pythium's gonna have. I don't know. I think I'm gonna put them as a B tier. They are a nation that has some overwhelming strengths, like the fact that they can get the main thing about Pythium that really sets them apart from the other Pythiums is that they get Therig Communicants, which is a unit that is a communion slave, not a commander, a unit. So it opens up some kind of cool stuff you can do. Like, you can potentially gateway around your communion slaves, right? Or you can, like later in the game, you can astral travel around with communion slaves. They're also like very expendable. Like, you can have communion slaves, participating in communions where you're not sacrificing your commander recruitment. So they're pretty efficient in terms of their infrastructure that way. And they're also a very good communion nation, and they have Roman troops, which are pretty solid. Pythium is a very solid nation. I like them. I think they're kind of towing the line between B and A. Yeah. But they take some time to get going. They do have gladiators, so they're pretty good at holding off a rush. They're pretty solid. They're pretty solid. I think the ones I keep looking at up here where I'm like, maybe it's these two. I'm looking at these two, and these two are kind of like, really these three, even Nabaa. Though I think Nabaa has probably a better claim. It's Man and Marignon, which I'm like, God, they're right on the edge. And it's like, is Pythium worse than Man or Marignon? I'm not really sure. I feel like these are in like some middle tier. Okay, next up we have Relay. And Relay, God, they're right between S and A. I think middle-aged Relay is the absolute... They're not exactly cancer, but they're like herpes. You can't get them to go away. Once Relay sets up in your pond, they're going to be there. They're not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Like it's not like having Scalaria or something parked next to you. But it's annoying. It's annoying, and it's there to stay. So that is middle-aged Relay. Middle-aged Relay, like whereas early-age Relay is aquatic, middle-aged Relay is amphibious. So they're able to go on land, and they have some of the best, oh my god. Meteorite Guard are so good. They're some of the better troops. I love Meteorite Guard. And they have really good communions. Middle-aged Relay is awesome. They're really good. They're really annoying to play against, though. God, I hate playing against them. Next up, we have Scalaria, which is S tier. I think they're like above they crush Nazca too. They're like, this is Scalaria's position. It's right here. All right, Scalaria is so strong. This is one of the few nations in the game that, in my opinion, cannot be allowed to exist. You have to kill it completely. Like I think if they have like 3 or 4 forts all clustered together around their cap circle, and you're like, oh, we've got them pinned into these forts, we're fine. You've bought yourself some time. I don't know if you're fine. I think you have to kill them. They are a scary, scary nation. They just scale so freaking hard. They have weaknesses. There's ways to kill Scalaria. You can do battlefield wipes. But if you kill the undead, you don't really care. The way you have to get at Scalaria is you have to kill their mages and their priests. And those are usually hard to get to. They're usually behind big armies of undead or hiding away in forts. So, yeah, Scalaria, super duper good. Super duper good. Next up, we have Shinuyama. Shinuyama, I think they're probably a B tier. They're cool. They have some cool stuff they can do. Bakamano Sorcerers are legit. I'm not actually super familiar with all the troops they get. I know they get some of the big, hard-hitting cudgel boys. So they get Bakamano Sorcerers who recruit anywhere. They get Ubas, which are pretty interesting. I've seen one player do some pretty interesting things using these guys as artificial communion slaves that are stealthy, and they've got 2 forms. It's kind of cool. They have kind of cool summons they get too. And where's their units? Do they not have cap on the units? Holy shit, I didn't even know that. But yeah, they get Banditos and they get Bakamano. Bakamano are legit. Yeah. And then they got these, oh yeah, these guys, the Daibakamano, who are big, hard-hitting dudes. Yeah, I think these guys are a very solid B tier. They could potentially be up here with these guys. Next up, we have Tianchi. Tianchi is interesting. They get special horsies, and the Tianchi horsies are pretty solid. And unlike one of the problems that early age Tianchi kind of struggles with is they don't have great recruit anywhere mages. Look at these guys, which are pretty solid. And then they get, other horsemen and stuff, which are good. Tianchi generally has good units throughout the ages. But what's special about middle-aged Tianchi compared to all the other Tianchis is they have the Imperial Geomancer, which is this guy. And this is one of the best recruit anywhere mages in the game. I mean, he is so good. He is so good. It's just super budget, super duper good. Yeah, it's almost hard to say enough about how good those mages are. So this guy probably towing the line. I don't think it's an A tier nation, because you're still going to be, you don't have like some kind of crazy scaling gimmicks, but you have like super solid troops and super solid mages, and that goes a long way. Yeah. The more I'm looking at it, I think we're going to go ahead and pull Man down. Man is solid. I think I'm going to go ahead and pull Marignon down too. Marignon's very solid. I think these guys are towing the line, but they don't have anything which is like crazy in scaling. So I think we're going to pull them down. I think these are probably better. Next up, we've got Ulm. Oh man, Ulm is an interesting one. Ulm is an A tier nation. Oh, whoops. Please tell me I didn't lose all that. Oh, thank God. Ulm is an A tier nation. I have like a back key on my mouse, and I accidentally clicked it. What's interesting about Ulm is they're going to have some of the best research timings, because they can make 5 gem items for 1 gem when they have a hammer, which means they can research like crazy. They also get really solid troops. The problem with Ulm is their mages are very good at the beginning of the game, but they're very, very lackluster past like turn 50. Yeah, they're just low fire and low worth is not good in the late game. So it's kind of weird because you're on the clock, but you're not on the clock to you don't have to rush people, right? But you have to make hay in the mid game. You have to make a lot of hay in the mid game. Either that or have like a very sophisticated plan for how you're going to deal with the late game that does not rely entirely on stuff Ulm can do natively. Next up, we have Uruk. Oh my gosh, Uruk in the Middle Age. This is a really, really good nation. They have really solid units. They have really powerful communions. They're size 3 stuff, and so they have a lot of HP, so they don't have a lot of the same troubles that a lot of the, like battlefield wipes and stuff and strategic nukes. They don't have to worry about a lot of the human nation stuff, but they're cheap. They're like very budget. They're a very economical nation. They get good summons. It's just a super solid nation. Very, very solid. And I mean, you could say, yeah, I'm not sure. I think the difference, let's take a look at Uruk. Like Tianchi, they're really, like the Imperial Geomancer is really, really good. So I'm kind of thinking if we compare Uruk to Tianchi, yeah, most of their stuff is sacred. Like one of the better, there's a few really good ones. One is this mage, right? So sacred and pretty high HP. The other one is the Naditu. Wait, where's... I could have sworn. Oh, this guy. Yeah. So I think Uruk's better. They can throw Earth into their communions too, but just having both of these guys as recruit anywhere, being sacred and them and having more HP means you're going to potentially be immune to a lot of, like, you can set up a lot nastier place, in my opinion, with these guys. Some people may think, that's not right. Maybe like it's on par with middle-aged Tianchi, but that's my opinion. Next up, we have, oh god, that's Vanarus. I always get the Heims mixed up a little bit. So next up, we have Vanarus. Vanarus is interesting. I think Vanarus is probably like a B tier nation. They have some cool stuff they could do. I probably would have rated them even worse until I saw Kobold Lord play them in the tournament finals. He did some cool stuff with them. I think if he had more time to get his feet under him, we would have seen even more cool stuff too. They've got really cool cross paths, and they've got pretty good research, and they've got kind of bad thugs, and they've got pretty decent troops. So they can do a lot of cool things, but they're not super obvious. It's more of like a high finesse thing. Like, I think they're towing the line, honestly, a little bit between B and C. But that said, if you play them well, like, and you do a lot of this cool kind of obscure stuff, you know, they can shine. They also have some blood access, so they're going to be able to get into blood. And that's kind of the same. If we look at Vanheim, they've got, I kind of forget, they've got the Valkyrie, and then they've got the Van. Yeah, so it's a little bit like a mix of Helheim, actually. It's like Vanheim with the Helheim unit, kind of. I honestly think it's kind of B tier. We have a few things going on here. One is we have the power inflation going to Middle Age. Vanheim used to be an A tier nation. Now I think they're pretty solidly B tier. Yeah, the Horsies, in my opinion, are significantly worse than Van Heers. They're still annoying, and they do elf horsey things, but yeah. Next up, we have Zabalba, which Zabalba, I think, classically would be considered C tier, but I've seen Zabalba doing really well in a lot of games. Figuring out expansion with them is hard. What I have seen or heard for doing expansion with Zabalba is you have to use a mix of your toads, and I think you also, if you can, you want to get some of the bats, because I think you can still get a few of the bats. But usually there's ways to frame it where the guys run at the toads and the bats snipe the commander or something like that. And a lot of times you're going to, I think too, I don't think you do scales expansion. You're going to want to use the sacreds and put some kind of bless on them. I can't remember what kind of bless people run with middle-aged Zabalba, but the thing is, there's not a lot of blood in the Middle Age, and if you recall what I was saying about Mictlan lost the blood mages, but they kept the blood summons. Zabalba lost the blood summons, but they still have a fair amount of blood mages, so they're kind of still one of the bigger blood powers in the Middle Age, which is definitely worth something. They also have a pretty strong amphibious presence, so I think Zabalba's pretty good. This is a fun nation. If you want to explore generic blood, you know, like, you're not going to just, like, if you play Lanka or something, you're mostly going to do the Lanka blood stuff, right? If you play Mictlan, you're mostly going to do the Mictlan blood stuff. If you want to just say, I'm just going to explore vanilla, like, generic blood, Zabalba's a pretty good nation for that, because they don't have any things to summon, but they can have a pretty good blood economy. So there's Zabalba for you. And then finally we have Yis. I think Yis is probably an A tier. They won the tournament. That counts for something. But yeah, they're pretty annoying. They're pretty damn annoying. And they do have major weaknesses. You know, the weakness of Yis is they're kind of classically weaker underwater than they are on land. And they also have the other weakness that, you know, some of their best mages you make on land. So it's this nation that wants to get on land so you can make your mages, but then the mages you make there, they can't go back in the water without gear. So it's kind of funny how that works. But still, despite those weaknesses, they have really good mages. They have really, really good sacreds. The Morvark Knights are probably some of the best sacreds in the game. And yeah, they can expand and get really big, and yeah, it's a very strong nation. So I think we've made it through all of them. I'm sure there's some things I've messed up on. I mean, there's things I've messed up on which I would probably disagree with myself in a month. But let me know what you think, and I hope you've enjoyed it at least, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.